on the main question. A better use of that will get you out of these long, boring meetings that never seem to end. So, managing discussion around hot topics. That is what we're all about tonight. And this is the same course that we taught about a year ago. So those of you who were here for that are going to see a lot of the same material covered. And for that reason, I would like for us to be a little bit more formal and interactive this time. If you have a question or a comment that you would like to interject, or maybe you have an experience that would enlighten what the lesson, feel free to raise your hand, and then we can, take a brief comment or anecdote. Um, and let's try it that way. If it gets to where that runs the meeting too slow, then we might have to tighten up and say all questions should come at the end of each section. But for now, we can take questions in real time and just see how that goes. I
Hey,
see
Todd, we
Kenneth
do
Dan.
have, we, yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
go
With
ahead.
Kenneth Dandy, was that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, just a quick question about I guess the duration of the speaking time.
Uh-huh.
If you establish, I think there's you can have a vote on that. I think prior to at the start of a meeting before you go into deep into the meeting. I forgot where maybe before you adopt the before you adopt the
Yeah.
agenda and all. You can
Uh-huh.
establish that the time limits at that point in time as well if you don't have it written in your bylaws, right?
You are correct. Yeah, if you don't have a rule, you can regulate it meeting by meeting with just a motion. That's called the motion to limit or extend debate.
That's it.
It itself is non-debatable, requires a two-thirds vote. But yeah, you can set a limit, and you can also change that limit later if you want to by a two-thirds vote. But yep, that is a good point.
Thank you.
Now the here's a brief intro to parliamentary procedure. It's sort of a recap of 101 if you saw that course. Parliamentary procedure is a way of discussing alternatives and making decisions with finality, compromise, and rights for all. Debate is good. It can be aggressive and critical of ideas, not people. It is about majority rule. You are trying to convince a majority, be persuasive. There are some people who look at parliamentary procedure as a bag of tricks to get their way. I've been not I was at a convention one time. I wasn't acting as parliamentarian there, but people knew that I knew about it. And there was a motion that came up that was totally outrageous. And it was one to suspend the rules, one to cut through pretty much the whole convention and just arrive at this result from the get-go. The whole thing that the convention was there to consider, let's just suspend the rules and do this. And that you could kind of tell the whole room was outraged. I didn't think it had much of a chance, but this one person, the leader of the group that I was part of, he said, do something, Todd. And I got up and made a speech, and I said, I just want everyone to remember that this requires a two-thirds vote. A majority is not going to pull this off. You got to have two-thirds. And then I sat back down, and he went, well, what? You didn't make it go away. And I said, I can't make it go away. We just all need to vote no. But he thought I was going to find some, magic rule that would say you can't do this at all. And if you want to make a motion to suspend the rules, I mean, that's a very powerful motion. You can do a whole lot of things. As long as you don't, go as far as violating your bylaws, you can do a lot of things with a motion to suspend the rules. And I just said, make sure that, nobody tries to pass this by a majority vote. It is two-thirds to suspend the rules and vote no. And I think we're good, and we were. But he thought that I was going to say some kind of abracadabra, make that motion go away, and that's not what parliamentary procedure is about. At the end of the day, it is about majority rule, the majority getting their way. I've heard similar with people, like somebody remembering the day after a meeting, hey, that motion I didn't like, I don't think it was ever seconded. Well, too late, buddy. The majority got their way. If you care about something like a second, you need to go point of order at the time it's happening. If the chair is supposed to call for a second, and if he doesn't get one, he's supposed to rule the motion out of order. But if he forgets and goes ahead and the majority adopts it anyway, that's more important than the second. By that point, the second no longer matters. So that's how it works. It's not about technicalities. It's about the majority getting their way. And as long as they are, that's pretty much the intention of the whole thing. The reason for all these rules is to make sure everybody gets their say and that all individuals are treated fairly and absentees have their rights. and so on. But that is, at the end of the day, what we're about is majority rule. Um, it is important for members to know parliamentary procedure. When you have a group where hardly anybody knows hardly anything about it, nobody knows how to make a motion or anything, you're not going to get good results because people may know what they want for the organization, but not know enough to, carry it out. You got to know how to make a motion. You got to know what the motion does and so forth. It does take effort to learn, like any skill, but it is worth it. I mean, if you participate in the kinds of meetings that use it, you will be able to operate a whole lot more efficiently. You don't have to learn everything a presiding officer might know. Like, in fact, I will be the first to admit there's a lot in Robert's Rules of Order that is antiquated. All that stuff about committee of the whole and quasi committee of the whole, no, no. Don't use those, and I don't even know why they're in there. They're annoying and they don't really work very well and they drive people away, and especially with those names like that. I mean, who would even know what such a thing means? But mostly where it's about fair debate and adopting what the majority wants. Um, and the parts that you do have to learn and remember, they'll become second nature after a while if you really stick with the study of parliamentary procedure, because all of the rules are derived from principles. There's a reason for every one of them, and once you learn the principles, you will start to understand the reasoning behind the rules, and then the rules will seem almost like second nature. Formality. A lot of people kind of look a little bit with disdain at the formality part, but it is a necessary and important part of it. I have seen in action why it is necessary and how it works. Specifically, these three parts of it, speaking in the third person, like the you would not say you to the chair, like to the chair of the meeting, the presiding officer. You would not say to him, "Would you allow me to speak?" You would say, "Would the chair allow me to speak?" You always refer to the chair as the chair, not you. Now, if you're a member, you can call yourself I. That is okay. You don't have to call yourself this member or something like that. You can say I if you're only a member. Now, the chair is supposed to call himself the chair. He's not supposed to say I either. And what this does is it keeps everything a little bit more impersonal, to where you're not dealing in personalities. Because once you start going you and pointing your finger and calling people by, and that gets down to point three, calling their name. You're not supposed to say people's names. Jump a little bit ahead, but avoid, sometimes it's unavoidable, and especially if everyone's getting along, you see this rule relaxed. But generally speaking, especially if things are tense, I would say avoid saying someone else's name if you can help it. Refer to, like, if you want to disagree with someone who just spoke, say, "I must disagree with the member who last spoke." Say it that way. Or if they have a title, use their title. um, Also, you address the chair, not another member. So you don't get, two people going, "You're lying, no, you're lying, no, you're lying." You can't say somebody's lying anyway. But or you said, "You're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong." No, you can't talk to each other at all. You have to phrase it when you're speaking in debate, as though you're talking to the chair. "Mr. Chair, I disagree with this motion because it would have us spending too much money. And furthermore, Mr. Chair," like that. You have to talk as though you're talking to the chair, even though it's for the benefit of every other member in there. That too helps to keep it impersonal. And by doing that, keeping it impersonal and formal, you are helping to keep it civil. And as I say, this formality part is some of the part you see relaxed, probably more than a lot of the other parts of parliamentary procedure. And in a group where everyone is getting along and friendly, it's not that much of a problem. But if things start to get rancorous, tighten up. You use the forms. You be formal. Speak in the third person. Address the chair and avoid names. Now, the principles, I was speaking about that before. Whoops, go back. Okay. The principles of parliamentary procedure, they are found in Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition, and they will, on analysis, be seen to be constructed upon a careful balance. Darn, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at controlling my screens here. They can be seen to be constructed upon a careful balance of the rights of persons or subgroups within an organization's or assembly's total membership. That is, these rules are based on a regard for the rights of the majority, of the minority, especially a strong minority, greater than one-third, of individual members, of absentees, and of all of these together. And the American Institute of Parliamentarians guide says that the knowledge of the fundamental principles of parliamentary law enables you to reason out the answers to most questions about parliamentary procedure. An understanding of these principles clarifies the subject of parliamentary procedure. When you understand the basic principles of parliamentary law, it is easier to become familiar with the rules because most of them follow logically from the principles. The principles are simple and so familiar that we sometimes fail to recognize their importance. They are the same principles on which democracies are based. Some fundamental principles are based on law and others on centuries of democratic practice. While an organization may choose to adopt a rule that is contrary to the fundamental principles, consideration should be given to whether such a rule is permissible under applicable law. If permissible, such a rule should be adopted only with serious consideration of the fundamental principles and the basis for their broad historical acceptance. The most accurate placement of such rules is usually in the bylaws. Occasionally, the fundamental principles, which have no order of precedence, may seem to conflict with one another. Often, this is the case. The parliamentary authority will provide a specific rule to resolve the conflict. An example of that is when the majority, which has the right to decide matters, wishes to end debate, while the minority wants full and free discussion. The book will resolve the principles by telling you a two-thirds vote will close debate. Some of the most important principles of parliamentary procedure are given. These basic principles serve as a foundation for the framework of democratic group procedures. The purpose of parliamentary procedure is to facilitate the orderly transaction of business and to promote cooperation and harmony. The philosophy of parliamentary law is constructive. Parliamentary law makes it easier for people to work together effectively and is designed to help organizations and members accomplish their purposes. Parliamentary procedure should not be used to awe, entangle, or confuse the uninitiated. The rules should only be used to the extent necessary to observe the law, to expedite business, to avoid confusion, and to protect the rights of members. Some basic procedural rules have been developed to ensure that the simple and direct procedures for accomplishing a purpose are observed. For example, some classes of motions have a definite order of precedence, each motion having a fixed rank for being introduced and considered. Another example of this basic principle is the rule that only one question is considered at a time. When one motion is under consideration, it can be superseded by a motion having a higher rank, but each motion is considered separately and in turn, so that only one question is before the assembly at the same time. Parliamentary procedure assumes good faith, respect, and legitimacy. It depends on the good faith of those participating. It's important to remember that everyone in a deliberative assembly is there as a result of an agreement. You can look at the bylaws of an organization as an agreement among all the members. They have agreed that we are going to do things this way. We're going to reach our decisions this way. And the whole enterprise is going to fall apart if the moment an assembly convenes, people are looking for ways to get out of the rules or to say that they don't apply to them. When the group has agreed to a set of rules, it's only going to work if people are willing to live with those rules and their outcomes. Furthermore, that is one of the rules of decorum in Robert's Rules of Order, is that you cannot speak ill of a prior action. Once something is decided on, you're supposed to be on board, and you can't speak disparagingly of an action of the assembly. Only by moving to rescind it or a similar motion and getting it back in front of the assembly where it's legitimate to debate can you do that. Parliamentary procedure provides for guardrails, checks, and balances in case of bad actors. It can withstand a certain number of unruly members, and there's even procedures for an unruly chair. There are ways that an assembly has of protecting itself when there are people not doing what they're supposed to do, people trying to abuse the system. But if the majority of the people in the room are bad actors, parliamentary procedure simply will not work. It falls apart. If the majority is willing to sacrifice process to outcome, process collapses. The continued operation of parliamentary procedure depends on a majority continuing to enforce it. You have to be willing to say, I want my side to win, but not like that. Well, there, I got ahead of myself. There it is. Okay. Even when arguing against another member, you should still be willing to defend their rights, like their right to speak under the rules and their right to vote. Procedural hardball or scorched earth tactics will ruin an organization. Engage rather in what is called institutional forbearance. Exercise restraint. Avoid actions that, while technically allowed, could damage the system by damaging good faith. Your bylaws override RONR. Remember that. It's very important. Just because it's an RONR doesn't mean it applies to you. If your bylaws cover an issue, then that's what prevails. So be very careful when you write your bylaws because you're going to have to live with them. There's something that gets into your bylaws that shouldn't be that way or is not really a good rule, there's not necessarily anything in Robert's Rules of Order that's going to come to the rescue because your bylaws are higher. At every meeting, you should begin each meeting by laying out clear guidelines for behavior and expectations. Inform all attendees of the meeting's decorum standards and the consequences of violating those standards. Sometimes at meetings where I'm the professional parliamentarian, especially if they're expecting, and sometimes one of the reasons I'm there is they're expecting some members to make trouble. So sometimes at the outset of the meeting, they will have me as professional parliamentarian read from Robert's Rules of Order the rules of decorum and make sure everyone understands. You can't insult each other. You can't call each other liars. And the earlier rules I gave you about formality, about only speaking to the chair. Sometimes they have me say, these are the rules and you must abide by them. But yes, however you do it, whether you do it by having a parliamentarian say it or whether just the chair says, look, these are the behavior rules I expect from you, the assembly. Set expectations at the outset. Now, who gets preference in record? Oh, I'm sorry. We have a question.
Yeah, my question is, you were talking about the bylaws are higher than Robert's Rules of Order.
Yes.
So if there's something in your bylaws, let's just say unbeknownst or to you, you wrote it and it conflicts with Robert's Rules of Order in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Does Robert's Rules of Order still fall below the bylaws at that point, or will it take precedent at that point?
No, the bylaws completely supersede Robert's Rules of Order. Um, so, I mean, that's why I was saying, like, about time limits for speeches. Roberts says 10 minutes, and that's what's in a, like, if your rules are silent
Mhm.
on time limits for speeches, then 10 minutes is what it is. But if your rules have a different limit, then it's your rules that prevail, be it in the bylaws or in your special, because there's also another set of rules called special rules of order, which are just, they're not quite bylaws, but they're meeting rules. That also supersedes Robert's Rules of Order. So your rules, whatever rules you make of any rank, they're all going to supersede Roberts. Roberts is the default for anything you haven't covered. So yeah, Roberts, and that's why it's a big, thick book because it covers a lot of situations, and most organizations rely on that. They're like, okay, we don't have to cover everything because it's already in Roberts, but anything they want to do differently, they do have to put in their own rules. Did that
Thank
cover
you.
it?
Yeah, thank you
Okay,
very
thank you.
much.
All right, Ms. Rayleigh.
Oh, there we go. One other question. You'd mentioned that rule on decorum earlier about, once you've sort of voted on something and then, to proceed with that as the what we're moving forward with and not to sort of disparage it. I'm
Yeah.
curious if that extends to past orders that are from previous iterations of the committee that don't include that particular member. In other
Mm.
words, they weren't in that previous group, but that is the rule that was decided by a previous iteration of the same committee, but that individual wasn't part of that decision.
I would say, yeah. I mean, if it's still in force,
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't. But it's just a way of dealing with it is to bring it back up and by a motion to rescind or amend or whatever. But this is talking about like in debate. If you're debating
Yes.
one matter, don't bring up another one and say, "Oh, we shouldn't have done that. That was wrong that we did that." That's the kind of thing that is out of decorum.
Great. Thank you for
Mhm.
clarifying. I really appreciate
Sure.
it.
Mhm. Okay. Let's see where we were. Okay, yep, preference and recognition. Um, this will help keep meetings on track and help everyone feel that they are getting a fair shake because, especially if they know these rules and see that you're going by them, but even if they don't know them, it's a fair process, so they'll see that you're calling on people in a fair order, not just calling on your buddies. But the maker of the motion has the right to speak first and last. So that's important to remember. They get to explain their motion after it's seconded and stated. They get to, you go back to that person and say, okay, now is your chance to, tell us all what you're doing and why you want to do this. And they also get to speak last. So when debate has apparently run out, the chair would look over at the maker of the motion again and kind of, maybe make an inquisitive look, letting them know, this is your last chance. We're, about to close debate. Did you want to take advantage of your opportunity to speak last? Normally, the chair states the motion, and then after the motion is made after and seconded, the chair states the motion and immediately recognizes the maker of the motion. And that works because usually it's assumed that the maker of the motion is going to want to say something. That would be weird if they made a motion and then just zip their lip after that. They want to sell it, right? The chair should recognize the person who rises first after the previous speaker has finished and taken their seat. Yeah, so it's first come, first serve. That's part of it. There's other factors though. Members must not signal that they want to speak. Oops, I'm sorry. Keep doing that. Members must not signal that they want to speak next when someone else is speaking. That's not a good process. It's distracting. Don't wave at the chair to let him know I want to be next. You just wait till whoever's speaking is done, and then you address the chair. Usually, you get if there's a lot of people who want to speak, you get a bunch of people all at once going, "Mr. Chairman," and he has to judge who was first. But there's also the other factors that someone who's not yet spoken gets preference over someone who has. So I told Gender Roberts you can speak twice. But if you're trying to make your second speech, someone who hasn't spoken at all, they get preference over you. And then the other part, chair should alternate between opposing views. So if he knows who's pro and who's con, he should try to alternate between the two. So if he takes a pro and then the next person who wants to be recognized is also pro, he should look around a little bit and see if there's a con trying to be recognized and then recognize the first con who's trying to be recognized. The chair isn't required to be perfect in that he's just supposed to try, but it is hard a lot of times he doesn't know. He can ask. He can sometimes if he can say, "Is there anyone who'd like to speak against the motion?" But he doesn't have to. That's optional. Chair does have some discretion in recognition, but he ought not to use it in a biased or unfair way. Yes, Kenneth Gandy.
Okay, yeah. The second bullet says the chair should recognize the person who rises first
Uh-huh.
after the previous speaker. So, in terms of trying to, be acknowledged to speak, do you rise first or do you wait? How do you get acknowledged by the chair without being out of order?
Yeah. Well, in a real room, um, it would be you'd wait until the person speaking takes their seat, and then you rise and say, "Mr. Chairman," and there'd probably be, a number of you doing that at the same time. In a Zoom room, you do just however you can. I mean, like you're doing here, you raise your virtual hand or whatever the rules say. But Robert's Rules of Order isn't really written for Zoom. It's written for live rooms. So that's the way Roberts puts it is whoever rises first. But yeah, whatever your electronic equivalent of rising is. But yeah, in a real
Thank you.
room, you stand up and address the chair.
Thank you.
Um, yes. Okay. The maker of, there we go. In debate, your speech must be relevant to the motion under discussion. The rule is that remarks must be germane. That's just another word, the parliamentary word for relevant. Means relevant. It must have bearing on whether the pending motion should be adopted. You can't start just telling like we've had at the last National Association of Parliamentarians convention, we had a guy get up speaking in debate on a bylaw amendment, and he starts telling the story that about his dog, and it didn't really seem to have anything to do with the motion, and everybody just started going, "Oh no, no, no," under their breaths, just kind of gently expressing their displeasure at this because he may have been leading up to something where he was going to make it relevant, but there's 300 of us here and we're busy and get to the point already. And so when you're speaking on something where it's not obvious how it's germane, you're going to be upsetting people. And if you're going to, leading up to a relevant point in a very roundabout way, then you're probably breaching order just by taking too long and not getting to the point right away. Your remarks must have something to do with the motion. So speaking on another topic is not in order. And I've had people who they just want to say something about the organization. They've got something they want to get off their chest, and they try to do it when a motion's under debate. They think if they can get it recognized by the chair, they can. It's their time for free speech, and it isn't. You got to speak to that motion. Some organizations have a thing called good of the order, where you're allowed to open forums, another word for that. You can get up and say whatever you want, but it's not in Robert's Rules of Order. You'd have to have your own rule establishing a part of the meeting like that, where you can just comment on whatever. Under Robert's Rules of Order, there is never a time for that. It's always about the motion. Okay. Now, this would be a good time. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience has any stories they can share about a time that they have seen someone say something go too far in debate. Now, don't quote them if they use foul language, but if you have any story of a member who had to be reined back in at a meeting, and I would like to hear it. And use general terms. Don't name anybody or anything, but I would like to hear a story of a time that you had a tough member. Anybody got one? Oh, I've got a ton. Okay. Anyway, you debate issues, not personality. The proposal, not the member, is the subject of debate. All sides need to be aired for the group to make the best decision. If debate were to be personal, members might not make important points for fear of hard feelings and personal attacks. You may attack the idea, but you may not question the motives of another member. You cannot say something like, what a member has said is false. Instead, you state, I believe there is strong evidence the member is mistaken. And for further information on this, you can look in Robert's section 4321. Now, on the idea that you can't attack the motives of another member, let me add to that, even if you have proof that his motives are nefarious. Well, considering the motion is not the time to bring that up. If his motives are nefarious, that might be grounds for disciplinary proceedings, but you don't bring it up when discussing the motion. It's even if the motives are nefarious, you cannot question the motives of another member when debating their motion. Yes, William Scafidi.
Yeah, thanks. So, under that scenario, if people start getting personal, and how would you recommend, as parliamentarians, we break break them up and
Yeah,
is rule of procedure number okay? You can't do that, or how would you phrase
yeah.
that?
Well, you start with one rap of the gavel and uh, let that be the signal that something needs to stop. You say, yeah, it a lot of times it's best to handle the first reach in an informal nature. Simply, will the members remember the rules of decorum? And then hopefully that'll put them in their place and they'll back off a little bit. Sometimes people don't back off, they double down. And a little bit later, we'll get into the escalating steps of disciplinary procedures during a meeting. And you'll see there are ways to an escalating series, but that is the way I would do it at first. In a Zoom meeting, I will say I have gotten in a situation where two people literally got heated and started saying, "You're lying, no, you're lying, no, you're lying," and I just started talking over them. I was not going to let it,
I can do
to the
that.
extent yeah, to the extent that I mean, in a Zoom room, you don't usually use a gavel, but I just said no. I just kept going, no, 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 you must stop, you must stop, And finally, when they stopped, I then just kind of repeated some of the rules of decorum. I said, you cannot speak directly to each other. You can only address the chair, and you cannot speak without being recognized by the chair. And just drilled that back into them. And they were, I think, intimidated. They backed off, and at
So
least for the
something like
moment.
point of
uh,
order. This is not the proper decorum.
yeah, well,
Please
no,
refrain. Would it be a
not
point
point
of
of order.
order or no?
You can call them to order, and I'll get to that in a little bit when I get to the escalating series of steps. I'll get into calling members to order, but that's what it would be. The chair doesn't ever make a point of order. Points of order are made to the chair for
Okay.
his behavior. It's like when you make a point of order, you're saying, Mr. Chair, I think you didn't do that right.
So,
But what the chair does is call a member to order if they're misbehaving. But that's not right off the bat. You do that after a warning or two because that you're getting into serious stuff when you call a member to order.
all right, great. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Here are some formalities that avoid personalities. I think I've pretty well covered all these. Okay, go down to the fourth bullet point. Avoid questions, or sorry, ask questions of other members through the chair. Madam Chair, would the treasurer please tell us how much this proposal will cost? That'd be a good way to put it. You don't ask a question directly of the treasurer. You ask the chair to have the treasurer tell you. That is the way you do that part. Keep it through the chair. You're always talking to the chair. And you refer to a member. Okay, we've already covered that one. Decorum in debate. Here are our rules of decorum. I don't think I've covered all of these yet, but this is pretty much them. Confining remarks to the pending question, it's got to be germane. You refrain from attacking a member's motives, address all remarks through the chair, avoid use of members' names, refraining from speaking adversely on prior action pending, that with its not pending, sorry, prior action not pending, and refraining from disturbing the assembly. That refraining from speaking adversely on prior action not pending is probably the hardest one for the chair to notice because a lot of times, when someone does it, they're not necessarily being rude or mean. They just start speaking against something. But if the chair realizes, hey, that's a motion that or a rule that we've adopted, then they need to say, hey, notify the member. Member might not even be aware they're breaching decorum when they break that one. Another one is refraining from disturbing the assembly. That's kind of a catch-all, doing anything that might keep people from anything that might make people distracted. Walking across the room is named as one possibility. Whispering is another one. Now, walking across the room and whispering aren't out and out prohibited, but if they disturb the assembly, then they are. And also is anything else that disturbs the assembly. So the chair gets a lot of leeway in deciding what is disturbing the assembly. It's the chair's job to protect the meeting, to protect the assembly, and allow it to conduct its business. Now, first, the chair can even use some nonverbal cues when trying to handle difficult situations. The here are some parliamentary tools that might help you handle heated situations when one comes up. You have a stand at ease and a recess and discussions outside of a meeting. And a stand at ease, in case you aren't aware of that process, that is a mini recess. That is when let's start with a recess. You all know what that is probably. It's a motion that if I move that we recess for 10 minutes and someone seconds the motion, then it's adopted, then you pause the meeting for 10 minutes. A stand at ease is a mini recess that the chair simply declares on his own. And the chair can do that. There's no set limit, there's no bright line about how long the chair can do that, but usually it's assumed up to 5 or 10 minutes, just very briefly. I've seen chairs do that to take a quick phone call. So if the chair says, will the assembly please stand at ease, everyone just talks quietly among themselves for a few minutes. That could be a good way to handle an argument breaking out. Take the people who are arguing and have a little powwow with them, or go to where they're sitting and try to talk to them one on one and see if you can get them to calm down a little bit or figure out a way to not be attacking each other during the meeting. Give a few minutes to calm down, a little timeout, and discussions outside of the meeting that can help. If in a lot of situations, it's better not to have everything right there in public with everybody getting upset about it. An informal request that the member, this is the series of escalating steps I was talking about. The informal request that the member follow the agreed upon procedure. And a lot of times, if you have two people who are getting into it, you wouldn't even find one of them at fault. You would just, say, would everyone please, remember the rules of decorum? Would everyone please follow the agreed upon procedure? It's only if it goes a little further that you actually have to start deciding whose fault something is. And then, like when you get to the point of calling a member to order, when you name an offender, that's even more serious. And that's an exception to when I say don't say people's names. This is a time you do when they're being that naughty that you have to actually bring charges against them. When you name it, like when you say, John Doe, you are out of order. By that point, now you are bringing penalties. And it is up to the assembly itself to vote on what just happened. There are disciplinary procedures in Roberts involving offenses that happen outside of a meeting. Like if someone did something funny with the money, you can have a trial, a disciplinary trial, and remove them. Well, or remove them, expel them, give them any penalty that your organization has the power to give. But for offenses that happen in a meeting, misbehaving in a meeting, that's handled on the spot because you don't have to submit any evidence. Everyone was there and presumably saw it. And so the chair, names the offender and then asks the assembly to vote on whether there should be a penalty. And it's all majority vote at this point. The person can be evicted from the rest of the meeting. That is probably the most, or ejected. That is probably the most common penalty. Also, fines are possible. It would even presumably be possible to be expelled from the organization. Now, in your case, you are subject to some statutes that would supersede even your bylaws. And the public is entitled to attend all of your meetings and committee meetings. So you cannot ban anyone from being at your meeting or committee meeting for any reason because the statute would prohibit that. Now, yeah, here it is. In Robert's Rules of Order, it says, if a member commits only a slight breach of order, such as addressing another member instead of the chair in debate, or in a single instance, failing to confine his remarks to the merits of the pending question, the chair simply raps the gavel lightly, points out the fault, and advises the member to avoid it. The member can then continue speaking if he commits no further breaches. More formal procedures can be used in the case of serious offenses as follows. Calling a member to order. If the offense is more serious than in the case above, as when a member repeatedly questions the motive of other members, whom he mentions by name, or persists in speaking on completely irrelevant matters in debate, the chair would normally first warn the member, but with or without such a warning, the chair or any other member can call the member to order. If the chair does this, he says, the member is out of order and will be seated. Another member making the call rises and without waiting to be recognized says, Mr. President, I call the member to order, then resumes his seat. If the chair finds this point of order well taken, so note that, it's a type of point of order. When you say, I call the member to order, that is a type of a point of order, okay? If the chair finds this point of order well taken, he declares the offender out of order and directs him to be seated, just as above. If the offender had the floor, then irrespective of who originated the proceeding, the chair clearly states the breach involved and puts the question to the assembly. Shall the member be allowed to continue speaking? This question is undebatable. Now, one thing that's important to note about this process is it doesn't have to be the chair. Sometimes you get a chair who isn't being proactive with this kind of thing. They're allowing it. They're standing back while a member is breaching decorum. And like what, let's say you're the aggrieved person. You're the person they're naming and saying bad things about. You don't have to sit there in silence and put up with it and hope the chair will rein them in. You stand up and you say, I am calling you to order. And then that way you yourself get to initiate the proceedings. The chair doesn't have to initiate it. Any member can. Naming an offender, that's the next one. In cases of obstinate or grave breach of order by a member, the chair can, after repeated warnings, name the offender, which amounts to preferring charges and should be resorted only in extreme circumstances. Before taking such action, when it begins to appear that it may become necessary, the chair directs the secretary to take down objectionable or disorderly words used by the member. This direction by the chair and the words taken down pursuant to it are entered in the minutes only if the chair finds it necessary to name the offender. Now, here's what I was talking about your code, and because this supersedes everything, your own rules, your bylaws, you have to obey what's in here regardless. Your voting procedures are established in each neighborhood planning unit. Although the procedure may vary among neighborhood planning units, bylaws describing the voting procedure shall contain provisions delineating the eligibility of voters within the planning units and the voting process itself for issues as well as officer elections. Each resident is defined in section 630.12.3 shall represent one vote and may hold office in only one NPU. And the important part, C, all NPU and committee meetings must be open to the public. And no, there are no qualifications or exceptions to that. That's got to be, so you must observe that to the letter. Oops, sorry. Okay. Any questions or comments at this point? See how we're doing on time. 6:48. When it comes to the chair's firmness and consistency, it is important that the chair not allow floor grabs. A lot of times in a contentious group, you will have someone just decide that they want to start talking. They've got something they've got to get off their chest. They just can't stand it another second, and they stand up and just start talking. They don't seek recognition. They don't say, Mr. Chairman, and wait to be recognized. They just say, excuse me, I have something I have to say. And they just start speaking. And a lot of times the chair is so surprised they don't immediately shut them down. But it's important that the chair not allow that. They have to stop bad behavior the first time because they're setting a precedent and have to treat everyone the same. If you don't, if you allow one person to do that, the problem is, what are you going to tell the second person who wants to? Um, I've seen that happen though. I've seen the chair. They didn't stop it the first time because they thought maybe that would be the only one, and they just hoped the person would make it real quick. And then when the second person tried it, they apologized profusely for allowing it the once and said, I shouldn't have done that. I should have told the first person, you can't do that, but I made a mistake. Now I'm telling you, you can't do that. So you can bring it back if you mess up that way, but it's better to be strict the first time if someone's just trying to speak out of turn. It's important you wait your turn. Now, here are the list of remedies for if the chair is not doing what she should do. Point of order is where you start. Anytime you think the chair is not doing what they're supposed to do, you say point of order. And that is the way of telling the chair that you object to the procedure that has been used. And the chair then, and this is important to remember, the chair must rule on the point of order. So a lot of times if the chair, if you're the one making the point of order, a lot of times if the chair's answer to you isn't satisfactory, a lot of times it might be vague or not a real answer, but you're entitled to one. So if you're entitled to a ruling on your point of order. So if the chair doesn't really give you a straight answer, you would respond to your to the response you get by saying, well, are you ruling against my point of order, Mr. Chair? Or not, you don't say you, I just caught myself. You would say, is the chair ruling against my point of order, Mr. Chair? And insist that the chair has to rule on it. Say the chair must rule on, in favor of or against my point of order. And then if the chair rules against the point of order, you can appeal it. You appeal to the assembly itself. and appeals are resolved by a majority vote of the assembly. So if the chair isn't doing right, the assembly itself can overturn whatever decision he's making by a majority vote. So it's important to remember that it is the assembly that has the ultimate authority. It's the assembly that put the chair there in the first place, and it's the assembly that gets to correct him when he is messing up or misinterpreting Robert's Rules of Order or the bylaws. It's up to the assembly itself to interpret its bylaws. So the chair, while he's running the meeting, is actually subject to the will of the majority of that meeting. Another motion that can be made for a chair who isn't doing what he's supposed to do is a motion to replace the chair for the remainder of the meeting. Sometimes called a motion to vacate the chair. That takes a 2/3 vote. And if it is adopted, then you would immediately elect a temporary chair for the remainder of the meeting. The chair is supposed to cooperate with any of these processes. He is not supposed to say, well, you're trying to kick me out. I'm not going to recognize that motion. He is supposed to recognize even a motion for that. If you are in one of these situations where you have a chair who is refusing to follow the rules, study section 62 of RO&R. It has that's pretty much a gold mine of information for what to do if you can't get any satisfaction from the chair. If the chair isn't recognizing your rights as a member. Let's see. Effective committees. It is important for your committees that you understand and address all of these issues, the purpose and structure of your committees, the role and of the chairperson, the strategy and the planning and the communication and the reporting. Your committee rules, you would their committees go by a more informal set of rules that's detailed in Robert's Rules of Order. Members may, well, this is really more applicable to a live room as opposed to a. Do most NPU committees meet on Zoom or is it in person? It would
Yeah,
which one?
mostly on Zoom.
On Zoom. Okay, so that's really not relevant. This
Excuse me,
is
I have
though.
a question.
Okay, give me just a second. Let me
Sure, go
finish
ahead.
this slide and I'll be right there. Motions need not be seconded in a committee. That may save you some time. And in case you don't know this, debate is unlimited in a committee, except for appeals, which is rare. So usually in a committee, you're going to have unlimited debate, but it can't be used to abuse. You so like no filibustering. You can't say, "Well, I'm going to talk all night to keep you from adopting this motion." Don't do that. That's against the rules. But free and fair debate with no limit in a committee. And yes, Kenneth Dandy.
Yes. Okay. So I think a couple of slides back, you said that if there's a motion to vacate the chair and
Yeah.
it is successful,
Yeah.
you said that the replacement is elected, or will that automatically default to the vice president or
Yeah,
vice chair?
you're correct. It would be the next in line, the vice
Okay.
president.
All right.
Yeah. Thank
Thanks.
you. You caught me there. Yep. Good catch. William Scafidi
Yeah, you say motions don't need to be seconded
in a committee.
in the executive committee meetings.
How many members on the executive committee?
Probably 6, 8.
Yeah, probably not. That your board would probably be meeting under what's called small board
Oh, this is
rules.
just for the executive committee. I'm sorry, my bad. I thought you were
Yeah.
talking about like the whole meeting.
Okay. No, the NPU would need they do need a second.
They have to be seconded, right?
Yeah, and
Okay.
of the full NPU, yeah. Yeah.
My mistake. Sorry.
In a committee, informal discussion of a subject is permitted while no motion is pending. Now, in a normal NPU meeting, that would be a big no-no. I think I've already opined on that. You can't just someone can't just get up to get something off their chest. You can't just talk about whatever. In a committee, you can. Now, not about whatever, but about things that are relevant to the committee's work without a motion pending, though. You don't actually have to have a clear proposal right there in front of you. You can kind of brainstorm a little bit or what, but it still, it still has to be about the committee and the organization or the NPU. But yeah, you get more informal in a committee. When a proposal is perfectly clear to all present, a vote can be taken without a motions having been introduced. Unless agreed to by unanimous consent, however, all proposed actions must be approved by vote under the same rules as in larger meetings, except that a vote can be initially taken by a show of hands, which is often a better method in small meetings. If the chairman is a member, he may, without leaving the chair, speak in informal discussions and debate and vote on all questions. That's very important to remember right there. This is true of committees and of small boards. If a board is, small, meaning less than about a dozen members, same way. The chair doesn't have to be impartial anymore, and he does get to vote. He does get to debate. So that's more like what, the kind of meeting you might see at work, where the guy, in your company, where the guy running the meeting, the boss, also is participating and, very much participating in the decision-making process. But it's still a democracy. It's still subject to votes. But this time the chair doesn't have to be impartial. He votes and debates. The chair does not have to, if it's in a real room, the chair does not rise while putting questions to a vote. If the chair is a member, okay, yeah, he can speak in discussions and debate and vote. Motions to end or limit debate are not in order, but see the procedure for dilatory speeches. We'll get there in a minute. A committee may not adopt its own rules except as authorized. So you may not have known that. Committees can't make rules, even for themselves, unless like say an NPU of a committee, if the NPU tells it can, then it can. But normally committees don't make rules. They have to go by the rules that are already in existence. Now, if a committee that is such a thing as committee hearings, and here's what Roberts has to say about it. When a committee is to make a substantive recommendation on decisions on an important matter, it should give members of the society an opportunity to appear before it and present their views on the subject at a time scheduled by the committee. I can see where, like a zoning issue or something like that might be something where you'd want to invite people to come comment. Anyway, to resume, such a meeting is usually called a hearing. During actual deliberations of the committee, only committee members have the right to be present, except in your case, city code overrules that. The whole public has a right to be present. Committee discipline. This is where I said earlier we get to this. A committee may protect itself against breaches of order by its members. Even though it can't make rules or limit debate, that doesn't go so far as to say it has to be the victim of an unruly member. It can protect itself. Committee can protect itself against breaches of orders by its members during committee meetings and against annoyance by non-members by employing the procedures outlined in 61:10 through 21. But the committee, instead of itself imposing any penalty on a disorderly member, can only report such behavior to the committee's parent body, which may then take such action as it deems advisable. However, if there will be no opportunity for this to occur within the time needed to effectively resolve the problem and enable the committee to complete its assigned tasks, the committee may protect itself against such disruptive behavior by requiring the disorderly member to leave the meeting room during the remainder of the meeting. And okay, not ready for that yet. I did want to add a little bit to the members' conduct during debate. That debate must be impersonal, and all discussion is to be addressed to or through the presiding officer and must never be directed to any individual. The motion, not the advocate, is to be the subject of debate. A motion, its nature or consequences, may be attacked vigorously. It is never permissible to attack the motives, character, or personality of a member, either directly or by innuendo or implication. It is the duty of the presiding officer to quickly stop any member who engages in personal attacks, discusses the motives of another member, or speaks or acts in a discourteous manner. Debate must address the merits of a motion, not people. Out of respect for the time of the other members, arguments and opinions should be stated as concisely as possible. A speech is made not for the pleasure of the speaker or for the entertainment of others, but to assist the assembly in arriving at a decision on the question under consideration. So theoretically, a chair could rein in debate if someone is simply getting too long-winded. Even if they are within the time limit, they could simply say, that the speaker is rambling a little bit too much. The speaker needs to be a little bit more succinct. A member is more likely to be effective in debate when demonstrating courtesy toward the presiding officer and other members. Anyone who uses improper language or acts in a disorderly manner should be called to order promptly by the presiding officer. When a point of order is raised concerning a speaker's conduct, the speaker must be seated. This is in a live room. It must be seated until the point of order is decided by the presiding officer. A member who fails or refuses to speak in an orderly or courteous manner may be denied the right to the floor, and if necessary, may be expelled from the meeting by the order of the presiding officer or by a vote of the assembly. Sorry, they may be expelled. Well, not in your case though, because the city code prohibits that. A censure could be used. I'm convinced a censure would be legit in your case because it doesn't really impose any penalty upon the member. It is simply a statement of an opinion. But if a member were engaging in, egregious conduct, then it would, in my opinion, it would have to rise to a pretty serious level. I mean, someone deliberately just uh, uh, reading the phone book out loud at the top of their lungs to the room at great length and refusing to stop, saying, I won't stop and you can't make me stop. I would censure that person. Um, and members who do not have the floor should listen attentively and respectfully to the remarks of the speaker. Good decision making is more likely to take place if members judge the speaker's remarks on their merits and not on the speaker. I will add that guests at a meeting, and talking here, well, I guess this would apply to both committees and NPU meetings, but guests are subject to the discipline of the chair, not necessarily a vote, but it is up to the chair to manage guests. Now, the chair can't ask them to leave the room because under your statute, the members of the public have the right to be there, but nothing like if a guest is causing a disruption, it would be up to the chair alone to manage that situation. The chair would not have to seek votes from the members to do something. He could handle it on his own, as long as he doesn't kick anybody out of the room. Now, here are the sources for the presentation I just gave. And now, fire away. Let's hear your questions. Let's hear your scenarios. Don't get specific about any real NPU, but you can go beyond, I would say, beyond the narrow topic of this presentation, handling difficult situations. You can ask anything about parliamentary procedure in general that you would like to know while you got me here. And but yeah, just we don't want to get into the nitty gritty of any actual NPU. That's the one place we can't go. But anything you want to know about procedure, fire away. I'm here. If anybody has an interesting story that's relevant to the course, or tell me how you resolved something. Yes, Kenneth Dandy.
Okay. I have a question in particular about making bylaw amendments.
Yeah.
And I'm not part of, well, I'm a part of an NPU, but I'm in leadership role there. But just in another organization I'm a member of, there were some bylaw amendments that were put out there, and the leadership of the organization, uh, they did not bring those forth to the body to vote on.
Mm-hmm.
So my challenge to them was that, when someone submits a bylaw amendment, it's the same as submitting a motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but since I was virtual, I had limited capability to object at any
Yeah.
rate. Um, and they were in person, by the way, meeting. So my question is, when with bylaw amendments, if someone does not put forth an amendment that was put forth through the proper channels and all, but not put forth to the body, you can a member make a motion to bring forth that bylaw amendment that was left out to the body on the floor at that time.
That, yeah, I mean, under Robert's Rules of Order, yeah, I'm, I would, your bylaws would be amended by whatever process your is in your bylaws. It should say in there what exactly it takes to amend the bylaws. What's most organizations say, and what the default in Roberts is, if you didn't put it in your bylaws, is two-thirds with notice, meaning advance notice has to be given to the members, and then so that they know in advance what's coming up, and then at the meeting where it does come up, they vote, and it has to be approved by two-thirds present and voting. Now, how you give notice, uh, you could either do it by asking the secretary to send out a mailed or emailed notice to everybody, and or you could give verbal notice yourself at the preceding meeting. Like just when the chair says, "Is there any new business?" You just stand up and say, "I'd like to give notice that at the next meeting I'm going to make this motion to amend the bylaws to do this," and then you state what your amendment will be, and then at the next meeting you would seek recognition and say, "I move the adoption of this bylaws amendment," and then you state your bylaws amendment, and then they have to consider it. Now, you might have in your bylaws, I'm guessing maybe a provision that says you'd have to submit it to the bylaws committee first.
Right.
And okay, then
That
that
is
would,
correct.
and
And the
then if they don't,
bylaws, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, in the bylaws committee, they supposed to, bring it to the body, right?
Uh-huh.
They go through. They receive them, and then they review them, and then they basically push it forward for the body at that point, right? And they can decide as a committee whether or not to
Mhm.
support it or not support it. But it's still supposed to go
Yeah.
to the body because it is a motion, right?
It if it gets if it goes to them from a meeting, like if it was moved to amend, like the process I just gave, and then you stand up and move to amend the bylaws thus and so, and then there was somebody else moved. I move we submit that to the bylaws committee. And then they came back at the meeting after that, and yeah, they would have to come back and recommend yes or no on what was referred to them by that motion to refer. But I'm wondering if you're talking about a
But
process outside of a meeting, like you just email it to them and then they decide what to do with it.
well, they're doing stuff outside of the meeting,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but to me the proper order of things is that once a bylaws has been proposal has been submitted,
yeah,
that gets considered by the committee that's reviewing it,
yeah.
but they cannot withhold it from the body. That
Yeah,
it
that
has to
would,
be
yeah,
submitted.
I'd have to see your bylaws to really know for sure. Because
It,
in just going strictly by Robert's Rules of Order, it doesn't have to go to them at all anyway. You
okay.
could do the whole thing yourself, give notice at
Hmm.
one meeting, and then make the
Hmm.
motion at the next meeting and
True.
totally bypass them.
That's true. Right.
But if your bylaws, now look carefully though at your bylaws and make sure that it really does have to go through them.
Hmm.
And if so, you could try. I mean, I can't say for sure this would be in order, but just you might look at in Roberts the motion to discharge. That might have some applicability here.
Alternate
That
discharge.
is what you use to take something back from a committee. But it would depend. You'd have to read your bylaws and read what Roberts has to say about the motion to discharge, because that might work.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Scafidi.
Yeah, to his point, I had a question about bylaws, policies, and stuff like that. Are
Uh-huh.
those voted on a certain time? Are they up for debate or discussion at every meeting, or do they handle quarterly or annually, or
Yeah, well, I
like
think
does it
for
depend on the MPU or?
yeah, I think for NPUs there's a law or a practice that you readopt them annually, or is it biennial?
Annually is correct.
Annually. Okay, yeah, because you're I think you're considered to reform the organization every year and start fresh. I think that's the idea. So amending them, it doesn't come up again at any time during the year. It's just anytime a member wants to give notice and make the motion to amend, or if there's a process in the bylaws that supersede that, follow that process. That's the way it would work. But under Roberts, there's no set time. It doesn't come up again. It just is whenever somebody wants to undertake the effort to make a change. Okay. Anybody else? We got plenty of time. It took longer last time. Everybody had a whole lot more to say. Y'all being quiet tonight. Oh, yep, yeah, we got 45 minutes left if y'all want it. Any scenarios you've run into, or anything you've always wondered about? Everybody has something they've always wondered about parliamentary procedure. There's so many misconceptions out there. I know some of you have to be wondering about something. How about this one? Have you ever seen anybody go, I call the question, like a member, like debate's going on, and somebody goes, I call the question. And then the chair goes, oh, somebody called the question. We got to vote now. There's a big misconception out there that when one member decides to call the question, that calls the question. And no, there's a vote on calling the question. In fact, it's a 2/3 vote. So the only way you stop talking on the main motion is if 2/3 of the people are sick of talking, not one person. Now, another error I've seen sometimes, this one cracks me up, is when people say, all those in favor say A. The A's have it. You think AYE spells A. I love that. It's the I's have it. Mr. Dandy, yes, sir.
Okay, another one here. So the second, when someone seconds the motion when someone seconds the motion and then the someone else before the chair states it says they want to offer a friendly amendment to the motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then the maker of the motion agrees to it, but does the seconder also have to agree to that? And if the seconder doesn't agree to the friendly amendment, what happens?
Oh, the seconder can withdraw. That's a good question. You're getting into the technicalities here. I believe the seconder, if they don't, seconder doesn't like the friendly amendment, and let me point out here, the only reason this is even conceivable is because it hasn't been stated yet. But yeah,
Right.
you knew to add that the chair hasn't stated the motion, so it does not yet belong to the assembly. It still belongs to the maker of the motion.
Right.
And so yes, if the maker of the motion agrees with the friendly amendment, but the seconder doesn't like it, the seconder can then go, I withdraw my second, and then someone else would have the second.
Okay. They withdraw the second on the original amendment. I mean, the original motion, or would that be withdrawn as well? I guess it would be withdrawn the second on that because they didn't second the friendly amendment then. Okay.
Right. But if it's a good friendly amendment, I mean, also the person that's making the friendly amendment might be the one to second now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll let me tell you about friendly amendments for a minute. Um, the latest edition of Roberts cleared up a lot of misconceptions about that, and I was glad to see it. Friendly amendments um don't really get any special privileges. We call it that just kind of as a way of knowing what we're talking about, which means an amendment which probably shouldn't be controversial. It corrects an obvious problem with the main, like the main motion, like let's say it was written or typed out and the maker of the motion forgot to put a the in there, the THE. And so the friendly amendment guy says, hey, I want to make a friendly amendment. You left out a the. You need to add that back. If the motion has been stated, then it's really, we call it a friendly amendment just so to signal to the crowd that everybody, the maker of the motion agrees with this. So you should too. But once the motion is stated, it belongs to the assembly itself, and the maker of the motion no longer controls it. So what would happen if it's an obvious, friendly motion like adding a missing word? Hopefully, the chair would say, If there is no objection, the friendly amendment is adopted. And then you can save a lot of trouble of debate and vote and all that just by adding the missing word back. Because the maker of the motion agreeing that it's friendly and the chair agreeing that it's friendly lets a lot of people know, okay, this is cool. Everybody agreeing this is a friendly amendment, so we won't get too upset about it. We won't dig too hard to figure out what they're trying to do. They're just correcting something. That's what it's for. Essentially, it's a signal that it's a correction, but it gets no special rights. Anybody else? It's a little bit of a smaller group than we had last time. Yes, that's one. Anything at all? Come on, you guys. Well,
Well,
if
I
no
will go
one
ahead
else
and
has anything, I guess that'll conclude my presentation.
yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in there. We'll give you guys a few minutes back of your evening. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thank our instructor, Mr. Todd Crowder,
Thank you.
for all this great information. And I'm going to share my screen just a second here to talk about some upcoming classes that we
Oh,
that we
Kenneth
have.
Dandy's raising his hand. Did I miss a question?
Oh,
Okay,
No,
sorry.
that was just an applause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
All right. So we do have some upcoming classes that you can participate in and register at mpuatlanta.org. The first being on Saturday, July 27th. This will be an in-person class. It'll be our Atlanta Community Engagement Playbook, which is a very, very, very good class. It's a very interactive class. We have some good instructors for that. That'll be in person to be determined on the location, but it will be from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday, July 27th. The next class that will not be in person, and anyone who knows and has taken our classes before will know that you would have taken the first zoning class in order to get into the zoning class. But it is Zoning Fundamentals Lab, and that will be on Tuesday, July the 30th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. via Zoom. And lastly, the last class for July will be Wednesday, July 31st from 6 to 8, and that will be our bylaws clinic, which is a really good class as well. As always, we thank you for coming out tonight, and don't forget to follow us on our social media at MPU Atlanta on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And we are the City of Atlanta Neighborhood Planning Units on Nextdoor, and we are MPU Atlanta on YouTube. We will definitely make sure that we send this presentation out to you. Please take a few minutes to fill out our survey this evening or whenever you have a chance. And we hope to see you at our next class. Good night, everyone.
Night.